Adam's Playground. Hooray!
Hey, Jeff Zito and another episode of Celebrity Jobber. Thanks for listening. I urge you to please, listen, subscribe, rate, review. I do like to read some reviews. Even the one person that gave me kind of a shitty review a few weeks ago. This guy, nothing new here. I interrupt the guests. It's sometimes it's hard. When you're interviewing somebody in person or you're on video, you can kind of read the person. You can see their body language. You'll kind of know when to get in and to ask them questions. But, when it's an audio style interview like this one, you kind of got to wait for a pause and then you got to jump in. And sometimes there are people that just naturally talk with those long, exaggerated, comedic pauses. And you're trying to jump in and you're actually interrupting them. Anyway, that one guy pissed off at me. But please, leave a nice review. Subscribe, rate, review. Listen wherever you pod. And this is now, 21 episodes? 22 episodes of Celebrity Jobber. So listen, it's been going great. Thanks so much for listening. I can't wait for next week. Actress Gina Gershon. She was in Showgirls. I think we saw her naked in Showgirls. It's going to be a good one. Anyway, so excited about this next guest because Adam Carolla, before he was in show business, he was just a regular guy. Most celebrities are regular people, obviously, if they weren't famous for what you know them for, they'd have to be doing something. And if they weren't famous, chances are they'd be like, selling insurance or just having a regular job, a 9-to-5er, a regular everyday ham and egger, as Rocky Balboa would say. By the way, I'm a big fan of Rocky Balboa, and I'm a big fan of our next guest, who had a lot of different jobs, and Guinness Book of World Records, most downloaded podcast. Of course, Loveline with Dr. Drew. Such an excellent radio show that kind of really, it did a lot for radio in the 90s. And I think it canceled in the early 2000s, or Adam jumped off in the early 2000s. But, man, just great. I'm a radio guy. I can appreciate this guy. I don't want to make him feel too weird. I don't want to tell him how great he is too much. When you have a grown man telling another grown man how much you like him and admire them, it tends to get a little creepy. Anyway, so without further ado, our guest this week on Celebrity Jobber, the one and only Adam Carolla.
Yeah.
How's it going, man?
How are you doing? Good.
I'm good. Is this, I know that this is what you do. You talk to people. People talk to you. And I, apologize in advance that it's a schmo like me. It's not Brad Pitt or somebody more interesting. But you are the interesting one in this situation. So,
I don't know that Brad Pitt's all that interesting.
Who is? Who's the most interesting person you've ever spoke to, either on the radio or your podcast?
Sean Penn is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Christoph Waltz is pretty interesting.
Okay.
Bryan Cranston is pretty interesting.
Oh, I'm looking forward to talking to him.
There's been a few.
You know why I think you're interesting is because... I do a radio show, too. You're not just getting stuck on a podcast with somebody, but the podcast that we're on is called Celebrity Jobber, and it basically looks at celebrities and their first jobs. And you're a very interesting one because before your big break, you were somewhat of a Renaissance man. Is that true?
I was a carpenter for my whole career, and I was a boxing coach, and I was a carpenter. Those were my jobs before I got into show business. But I was a full-time journeyman carpenter. That's all I did for a living.
What was your first job, Adam?
My first job, technically McDonald's.
Okay. And that's before they had the computerized ordering system when you had to talk to a real human.
Yeah, except for no one talked to me because I worked the grill, which is, it's like, if you didn't think working at McDonald's was bad, it gets worse.
Right.
If you're standing at the counter all day, that's boring, but it's not brutal. Standing over that griddle all day, that's brutal.
That's got to be an acne producer as well when you're a teenager.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, they would say, don't eat that greasy pizza.
Right.
Your skin's going to get oily or whatever it is. I don't think there's anything to it. I think it's all genetic. I think acne is just basically a genetic issue. Some people get it, some people don't. And I don't think it matters how often you scrub your face or how many griddles you stand over.
Yeah, tell that to my wife. She's one of those that washes her face all day long. Adam Carolla, I got to tell you, this is really exciting for me. I followed your path, not as successful, obviously. You've got the most downloaded podcast in the Guinness Book of World Records. You've given me advice a long time ago, and that was about your podcast, being consistent. How has being consistent really made you, the level of podcasts that you have? How has it made you so successful just simply by being consistent?
Yeah, I don't think there's much difference between podcasting and working as a UPS delivery guy or being a CEO. I mean, just show up, be consistent, show up every day, have a good attitude, have a product, and, it'll take you in the right direction. I don't think that there's, show business isn't really much different than any other business. It's just show up, work, outwork the person. Everyone gets lost in sort of talent and God-given ability and all that. Guys like Jimmy Kimmel are funny and they're talented, but their key to success is their work ethic. That's really the key. Most comedians are lazy and drunk,
Right. What do you think your big break was? So, I've been reading a little bit about you. I'd love to know more about you as a boxing coach. I thought that was really, really interesting stuff. But here you are, carpenter, boxing coach. You meet Jimmy Kimmel. There's some radio bit you're training him for. Was that meeting with Jimmy Kimmel and that circumstance your big break to where, you got the Loveline gig with Dr. Drew?
Yeah, I'd say that was my big break. I never really think in terms of big breaks because it's kind of a myth. You start working, you start training, you do everything you can do, and then that's what I was doing. But if there was a big break, so to speak, it was when I met Jimmy Kimmel. But except for Jimmy Kimmel wasn't Jimmy Kimmel back then. He was doing sports on a local morning show, so he didn't really have much juice. He wasn't a star maker. No one listened to him back then.
It was Loveline that got you into the radio business, and then from there you're, with Jimmy Kimmel and the Man Show, which I was talking to a coworker not too long ago. We thought that was just an incredible piece of television history. Do you think that could be replicated in today's atmosphere?
No, it's funny. People would always ask me, could you do the Man Show today? And for years, I wouldn't really have a good answer for them. And I thought of one just the other week. And so somebody said to me, could you do the Man Show today? And I said, I could do the Man Show today, but I'm not sure Jimmy could do the Man Show. And I think that's kind of where we're at as a society. If you work for a broadcasting company, if you're mainstream, you have to pick and choose what you say because your livelihood depends on it. If you're sort of an outsider and you're doing a podcast and you're doing stand-up, then you can say whatever you want, whenever you want.
So tell me a little bit about growing up, Adam. How was your life growing up? There's been some, I think it's Wikipedia. I think somebody needs to update your Wikipedia page. It says Adam Carolla, born in Los Angeles or Philadelphia. Well, let's set the record straight. Which one was it?
I was born in Los Angeles, but my dad's from South Philly.
Okay.
So there was some thought that maybe I was born in Philadelphia.
Well, you seem like a northeastern guy. I'm sure a lot of people always, probably don't know. You ask you're from New York, or because you seem like that's your vibe. But if you're living with a father that's from Philly, I can understand how you would adopt some of his habits. So, growing up in L.A. as a young Adam Carolla, what was your life like growing up? Did you have a good childhood?
Not really. My parents weren't really that into their kids. Everyone was just poor and pretty depressed, and I just sort of left the house and kind of made my way. I just ate at other people's houses, hung out at other people's houses, played with other people's toys. I lived in a crappy little house with kind of depressed parents, so I just took off and I just played sports. Really, that's kind of all I did as a kid.
And you were a pretty good athlete. I hear you were a pretty good athlete. You could have played football in college.
I got some college scholarship offers out of high school, not major colleges, UC Davis, Cal Poly Pomona, Marshall, actually, was a decent.
Well, that's pretty
school.
decent, yeah.
I didn't even know where Marshall was. I wasn't going to college. I was a bad student, and I just left high school and started construction.
So do you think if it wasn't for your career now, you ever look back and think if it wasn't for that chance meeting with Jimmy Kimmel, that Adam Carolla could be a carpenter right now? Do you ever think about that kind of stuff, or is that just too far in your rearview mirror?
I imagine that I would have found my way into some form of comedy. Probably not, maybe not radio if I didn't meet Jimmy, but I was doing comedy. I was doing sketch comedy and improvisational comedy and stand-up comedy. So I imagine I would have found my way into something, but I don't know if I would have found my way into as much success as I had if I hadn't met Jimmy. I don't think I would have, or if I would have, it would have been a different direction. Maybe I would have worked as an executive at Comedy Central.
Right. You like doing stand-up? It seems like you legitimately like to be in front of a live audience. I see some of your podcasts. You do live. You travel to certain places, and you seem like and a guy looking in from the outside doesn't look like you really want to be in front of people, but I guess you probably do, don't you? I'm not for it or against it. I just do it. You know what I mean? It's a job. I'm not really. I don't have any problem being in front of people. I appreciate that they came out, paid money to see me, and I enjoy myself doing it, but I don't have to do it. I've never felt that I wanted to be, on camera or in front of an audience or anything. On the other hand, I'll do it anytime you want me to do it. So I probably have like a healthy relationship with it. It doesn't make me feel alive. It doesn't make me nervous. It doesn't change anything. I go, I get on a plane, I show up, I get paid. I appreciate that the people came out. After the show, I hang out, take a picture with everyone, and then I go back home, get my bathrobe, and watch TV. There you go. You're just a regular guy. You think you're a regular guy?
Yeah, I'm pretty regular because of how I grew up and what my job was for so many years.
What about, I guess you're going to be at, is it Captain Brian's Off the Hook Comedy Club or at Rose Seafood in Naples? I have, by the way, a relationship with Captain Brian. So if you think that's a little sketchy, a grown man calling himself captain, he doesn't own a boat, I'm just letting you know I'm vouching for him. He's actually a pretty legit guy. He's a nice man.
I don't know where I'm going to be in Naples, but it's coming up. If you go to AdamCarolla.com, all the dates and all the clubs and the podcast and everything will be there. So anyone listening wants to come out and say hi, just go to AdamCarolla.com and you can figure it out.
You're definitely going to be there. So when you meet Captain Brian, just think about this conversation. Go, oh, yeah, that's what this this jobber was talking about, Captain Brian. So I wish you all the best of luck. You don't need it. You're very inspirational, and I thank you for your time, and good luck to you, and thanks again for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
There you go. You know, you're talking about a regular person right here, a guy who grew up in a depressed household. Hey, you know what? A lot of us did. You know, I didn't. I was fortunate. I grew up in a nice house. I had a good family. I had a father that did well. My mother stayed home and, mothered us and took care of us and cleaned up after us. But, not everybody has that situation. I could tell you my son didn't have that situation, not because of me, but, me and his mom got divorced when he was very, very young, and he lived with her. He saw me on the weekends and had a different, life with me on the weekends. But with her going to school, she wasn't career oriented or goal oriented. And, she had her own troubles. And, my son did a lot like Adam Carolla did, went to a lot of his friends' homes, played with a lot of their stuff, watched TV at their house, ate their food. Didn't really spend a whole lot of time at home because home life kind of sucked. And I guess Adam found sports, and that kind of took his mind off of his, shitty home life that he had with his parents. And good football player, and actually offensive line. I thought that was kind of weird because, look at Adam Carolla. He's kind of like, long and lanky. Doesn't really look like a lineman by any stretch. But regardless, got some college offers. He said, not too many big colleges. But then he threw Marshall out there. That's a pretty substantial college. College was not for him. He was not going to college. Got out of high school, became a construction worker. And then, of course, carpentry became part of his life. And I meant to get into boxing with Adam because he was a boxing trainer. I think that's incredibly interesting. He was also a boxer, I think an amateur boxer at one time. But when he was training boxers, it was this weird thing with his pal Jimmy Kimmel, who he became friends with. Jimmy Kimmel was some stunt guy at K-Rock, the world famous K-Rock in Los Angeles. And they were doing some fight. I think it was called the Bleeder in Reseda. And Adam Carolla somehow got hooked up to train Jimmy Kimmel in this boxing match. And that the rest is history, man. I mean, people at the radio station ended up liking Adam. He was a pretty funny guy. Obviously, you can see he's got a great sense of humor. Got the radio show Loveline. I mean, that was huge. That's where it all started for him. But if it wasn't for that big break, if he didn't meet Jimmy Kimmel, training him in some radio stunt, if he didn't know Jimmy Kimmel, they didn't know each other existed, what would he be doing? He kind of thinks, because I thought he'd be a carpenter, but he kind of thinks he would have found his way into stand-up comedy. He was, the member of some of these improv comedy troupes. And being out there in L.A., I think Groundlings was one of them that he mentioned. And that's a pretty big deal. A lot of big-time comedians come from the Groundlings. So Adam thinks he probably would have found his way into comedy somehow. I think he would. Because, I mean, you see what the guy has done. He's, kind of under the radar right now, unless, of course, you listen to his podcast. I urge you to listen to his podcast. He's got so many famous people on there. He's really funny. And he is like the godfather of podcasting. You hear like Joe Rogan, he makes all the money. He's got the big podcast. But Adam Carolla, he did it first. And he did it successfully right away. And when he gave me that advice, I don't know how many years ago about podcasting, just be consistent. Make sure you're doing it, every week you're doing it. You're not skipping a beat. And he's right. And he basically said that's really what it takes to do anything, whether you're a UPS driver, a CEO of a major company, whatever it is you do, consistency and having a good work ethic. That's kind of what Adam Carolla is all about. And it's really pretty fortunate to talk to him. Got a lot out of it, and I hope you did too. regular guy, just like you and I. That's right. Who knows? Maybe your big break's right around the corner. I'm hoping mine is. But we'll just keep doing this, though, for the time being. Thanks so much for listening. Again, listen, subscribe, rate, and review. Available wherever you pod. That'll do it for another episode of Celebrity Jobber. We'll see you next week. I'm Jeff Zito.